Good day, good evening, good morning to everyone. My name is Vladislav Zhmailo. I am Senior Policy and Guarantee Coordinator at IFOM Organics International, and I would like to welcome you to our final webinar, the new EU Organic Regulation Key Changes for Organic Producer Groups. I will moderate this event with Taching Chang, who is also working with me in Policy and Guarantee Department at IFOM Organics International. This webinar is brought to you within the project Organic Trade for Development, implemented by us, IFOM Organics International, together with Research Institute of Organic Agriculture, FIBEL, IFOM Organics Europe, and Helvetas. Of course, with the support from the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs. This third and final webinar, hosted by IFOM Organics International, will summarize the fundamental changes for certified groups as understood today and explain the implications of the regulations rules with regard to groups' legal entity and composition, as well as other new requirements that organic groups need to be aware of. The guidance has been developed in close cooperation between IFOM, FIBEL, European Organic Certifiers Council, and within an international expert working group over the course of almost 2 years, based on careful analysis of the legal text and a lot of exchange with the sector. After the initial presentations of the guidance during public events, we received a lot of feedback from numerous stakeholders, including policymakers, and it became clear that there were divergent legal interpretations around the definition of group of operators. This made us to enter into dialogue with key stakeholders and seek for interpretation that would allow to certify smallholder farmers organizations in their historically developed organizational structures that were working for more than 20 years. During this phase that lasted almost 1 year, tremendous work has been done by IFOM, FIBEL, and others that included numerous public events, private consultations, and so on. As a result of the divergent interpretations around this article, the European Commission issued an official clarification on Article 36 in the questions and answers documents that has been published recently. Some key answers in the document were fundamentally different from the interpretation of the organic sector, and the guidance today presented to you is based on the Commission's official interpretation of the regulation. It is also important to make a statement about this. So IFOM Organics International still disagrees with the application of specific clauses of the European regulation to numerous certified groups in third countries. We believe that this strict word-by-word legal reading of a legal text fails to consider the existing organizational structures of these groups and their compliance with the regulation, and also the negative effects after their compliance with the new EU regulations. Nevertheless, this law has been adopted, it has been voted for by policymakers, and we have to inform you about these changes that are coming from 2025. These changes will be presented to you by our renowned expert in the field of group certification, Florentina Mainshausen, project manager from FIBEL, with whom we are cooperating since 2004 when the first group certification toolkit has been published on our website. Please feel free to post your questions using the Q&A panel in Zoom. Today, we have again a full house of participants. So now I see that 497, so soon we will be 500 participants have joined us. This is why we cannot enable chat, but we enabled for you a question and answers panel so that you can ask your questions and other participants can upvote these questions so that we can see that these questions are very relevant and we need to pay attention on them. We will not be able, of course, to answer all of them, but we will try our best to pick the most interesting ones. We have also posted a survey in Zoom to know more about our audience. I kindly ask you to identify to which groups of stakeholders do you belong, so we will know better our audience. Please know that this session is recorded and the recording with slides with additional information will be shared through our communication channels among participants, but also not only to them, but to the larger audience. The final version of the guidance presented today will be also published on our website after some facelifting, but you will receive slides from this event. Now I give the floor to our expert, Florentina Mainshausen. Florentine, you have your time, please.
Thank you very much, Vlad, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much. We have such a full house today. And before I start with the content, and we have a lot of that today, I'd like to start with thanking all of you in the audience and beyond, who over the course of the last 2 years have been discussing these new rules with us, debating, correcting early versions, providing feedback, mulling over articles, how they can be read. This really has been a huge effort of a whole sector and many individuals. I'm really grateful for this. We wouldn't be there where we are today without this collaboration of so many individuals and organizations. So thank you very much. As we all know, the new regulation is rather complex, and as such, also the guidance turned bigger and bigger, and we have a rather dense program today. We'll start with an introduction to the regulation and an overview of key changes, some of which may be new. We'll dive deeper into the definition of a group of operators, because that's where the trickiest bits of the new rules are for grower groups in particular, and discuss the implications that this has for certified producer groups. For these parts, we'll go a bit deeper because a lot of it is new, and it's quite important that everyone understands that, because it's fundamental changes that aren't really obvious or expected by many groups. Then we'll also take a brief overview on the new ICS requirements. I won't go equally deep there because these are aspects where it's more important that you know where to read up things. For those who have to implement an ICS, they're easy to read. We'll also give an overview of the new organic production rules for groups of operators, focusing in particular on aspects that are kind of implemented differently in grower groups right now, and on changes that are relevant to be aware of. And then we'll briefly touch on the subject of external control of groups of operators. How will that work? What will change? And I have to start with a big disclaimer that this is, as Vlad says, our current understanding after detailed and long analysis, but it's still a simplified summary of the requirements. And actually every word of the legal text is the basis for certification. So this is not a certification standards. You're advised to refer to the regulatory text for clarity. Interpretation will change, and your operators will be certified according to the recognized control body's interpretation of regulatory texts and official guidance. So we have developed this for training purposes to simplify and summarize a rather complex content, and I hope we'll be successful in that, in conveying the changes to you. Next. So let's start with the introduction and delve into the key changes. Next. So as the number of people present today already shows, we all agree changes in group certification matter massively. We're talking about more than 80% of organic farmers worldwide, way more than 2 million, several thousands of ICS certified groups, especially in products like coffee, cocoa, sugar, cotton, honey, but also in various other tropical fruits and various other crops. And the vast majority of these groups will be affected by the changes, because most countries will be directly affected by the changes we're discussing today. Next. So the new EU regulation is a complex new legal act with more than 40 secondary acts, and more keep coming. It was clearly aimed to strengthen the organic integrity, in particular for imported products. And it's also a big milestone in terms of group certification, because it's the first time ever that group certification is directly included in the regulatory text. So it's now, the whole regulation is now written for individual operators as well as groups of operators. And just to start what we have already been saying quite often, the application of the new regulation will have significant consequences for almost all certified organic groups worldwide. And that's, I think, is also why we get such interest in this training. Next. The new regulation, I'm not going to read you the articles. I just want to point out that if you read the regulation, please use the consolidated version, because a lot of amending and adding regulations are included in the consolidated version. And if we reference the regulation, it's always the consolidated version we refer to. But please note that in addition to the consolidated versions, there are numerous regulations. There will always stay separate legal acts that you will have to read in parallel to the basic act. And you'll find always the numbers of these different regulations indicated in the guidance. So it's easy to find them on the web and look them up. But also the IFOAM Europe website links to all regulations. And there is a guide provided by IFOAM Organics Europe. Next. So is the regulation already applicable? Well, yes and no, because it is in place and applicable for operators and groups of operators, which don't exist, in the EU since January 2022. However, there is a transition period for recognized equivalent control bodies until the end of 2024. And now this transition period is important because with the change to the new regulation, all organic CBs have to apply from scratch for recognition as a compliant control body under the new rules. So this process of application for recognition is currently ongoing since 2022 and 2023. And because this application process is ongoing and quite complex, the first list, and then everything has to be reviewed by the European Commission. The first list of recognized CBs is expected only from mid to end of 2024. And you can already see in the time schedule that since all certificates need to be new by the 1st of January 2025, this is quite challenging and makes the next 1.5 years until the end of the transition period a bit uncertain how it will pan out in practice. So operators should always contact their own CBs to learn about the program and timeframe for switching to the new regulation. But the new certificates can only be issued once the CB is listed for compliance and the operator has been inspected according to the new regime. So this year, all CBs are still busy applying for recognition and apply the old system or the current system of organic control. They train staff, they start to inform operators. And next year, at some unknown point in time and varying by CBs, inspections according to the new regulation should start as per CB plan. And the certificate should all be ready by the end of December 2024. Now, I hear, of course, immediately the question to this is always, how should that work if the CBs are only recognized towards the end of the year? And the answer is nobody knows. I mean, we have to assume that organic trade hopefully will not be allowed to break down on the 1st of January 2025. But we don't know at the time being, and this is the reality, and everybody's juggling as best they can, and please contact your CB for details. Next. So what are the key changes? The biggest, by far biggest and most fundamental change is that the organic import system of the EU changes from equivalence to compliance. Currently, most countries worldwide, groups and operators are certified according to their certifiers' equivalent organic standard, which are somehow adapted to local condition and international terms, and a bit simpler to read and access and so on, although they comply obviously with the same rules as the old EU regulation. But with the new regulation, all operators in third countries will need to comply with the same very detailed, quite prescriptive and complex rules that are written directly in the regulation, the same rules that apply to EU operators. And also countries with their own organic legislation recognized as equivalent, for example, Tunisia and India, in terms of southern countries, need to renegotiate a trade agreement with the EU. If they don't achieve it, or for products not covered under them, the operators also have to be certified under the new compliance system. Now, on the upside, having clearer rules that are the same for everyone obviously gives a more level playing field and makes many things clear that maybe haven't been so clear in the past. The downside of the approach is obviously that there is no flexibility to adapt to local conditions and realities, and also that the law is set by European lawmakers thinking more about application in Europe, but at the same time, the rules do apply directly and without any adaptation to third countries. So this is the cause for many of the challenges or sort of tricky issues, which we're going to see as we work through the changes. Next. The second key change is the definition of a group of operators. So other than we thought that group of operator certification is somewhat, with some adaptation, a certain continuation of a system of group certification that has been practiced over the last 20 years. Turns out, no, the regulation defines group of operators as a completely new concept. The definition sounds at first not too tricky. Legal entity composed only of organic and in-conversion farmers. All members of this the group of operators have to be under the new farm size or organic turnover limit, and the group of operators can have up to a maximum of 2,000 members. Now, the problem is that the real groups currently certified, including a lot of farmers cooperatives who have been certified for decades organic, don't meet this definition to the letter. So it's only some certified producer groups who meet the definition and can be certified as group of operators in their current form, whereas the majority, I'd even say the vast majority of currently certified groups will need to set up new legal group entities or identify existing group entities that can in future be certified as a group of operators. This includes all contract production groups, so groups where smallholders are organized by the trader or a processor, as well as all farmers organizations with non-organic or larger statutory members. Next. So why is this different than before? Vlad has already pointed out that there has been a lot of discussion and debate around the definition of group of operators. And effectively, that article has been very, very tricky to apply because it is far from the realities how many groups are organized right now who have been certified for the last 20 years. So this definition and the resulting implications really have been intensely analyzed and debated since 2019. And with the publication of the June 2023 frequently asked question document, the Commission has issued legal clarification around the definition of groups of operators, which now forms the basis for interpreting the regulation. So we have obviously updated this final version of the guidance based on the Commission's official interpretation. IFOAM position, Vlad has already explained briefly that IFOAM disagrees with this application, this way of interpreting the regulation in a narrow, just literal reading of the text way, and argues for a more comprehensive assessment of reading the legal text, consider the spirit and the intention of policymakers when they adopted the law, which we sort of started off to when we started off in interpreting the rules, because obviously the regulation was also meant to give smallholders access to organic certification. So there was a positive intention there. But now we have adapted everything to the legal ruling, because the EU is also bound with what the European Parliament had decided. Next. So what is new as well? There are now detailed ICS rules directly inside the regulation. They are stronger and clearer. They're in line with established best practice, but many details may still need to be aligned. The new rules set high expectations on quality of the ICS, and the ICS manager has a key role to play. Tejun, we see your mouse sort of over the screen all the time. Maybe you could change that. It's a bit disconcerting. There is also updated organic production rules. The main change being, however, not that the regulation has changed so much, but that all detailed EU production rules will need to be fully complied with, every word of them, and no longer in an equivalent way. And some rules are also effectively stricter, especially on crop rotation, retroactive approval, planting materials, and parallel production. There's also new restrictions or new additional rules that apply for plant protection substances used in third countries, which we're going to discuss later. Next. Next one. So to give you another overview of a key change, the external control of groups has also changed. So in future, a minimum of 5% of members of each group of operator needs to be re-inspected each year. That's a change away from a square root approach that was practiced the last 20 years, and it increases the control rates for groups larger than 400 members. It decreases the control rate for smaller groups. And additionally, there is a minimum of 2% of members of each group of operator that shall be subject to sampling every year. And also there is inspection of ICS, group of operator requirements, and purchase centers, obviously. Overall, we expect stricter control because the control bodies will need to control a lot of detailed requirements inside the regulation using the compliance approach instead of a current system of equivalence, especially around ICS and a lot of other rules. So overall, we expect that the control will become stricter, at least eventually, once the new rules are adopted. Next. Other changes that affect all types of operators, which we're not going to explain further because they're generic challenges or changes that apply to individual operators as well as groups, is a big focus on preventive and precautionary measures for all types of operators to avoid contamination and commingling of organic products, and even stronger focus than before on product traceability and mass balance checks and keeping records for that purpose. And operators and groups are expected to have a demonstrated ability to trace lots throughout their operations, and even the EU can even require that imported lots are traced back to origin in reasonably quick times. And then there is also an ever-growing strong focus on sampling by both the control bodies and measures in case of detection of any unauthorized substances by both operations and CBs. There's also clearer rules on blocking products while investigating the case of suspected or confirmed presence of non-authorized substances in an official investigation. So this is the topic that IFOAM is working on separately since many years, and we refer to another IFOAM position paper on this particular topic because this is not what we will be discussing today otherwise. Also important to be aware of major new change is that the EU will define high-risk products in third countries. So essentially it's a list of, I assume, a list of countries with respective products that will be subject to control twice a year by the control body and more intense sampling of operators and consignments each year. So this will only apply from 2025 onwards. But until the regulation applies fully, there are defined additional measures at the moment that are communicated directly by letter to control bodies in third countries to have additional control until the new rules and the new high-risk product list will be published. This list is not yet available. All we have is the current additional measures list by the EU. Next. What are the challenges? I mean, you have already heard us talking about challenges, and indeed there are challenges with these regulations. And let's briefly sort of summarize them now at the beginning, and then mostly focus on how we can implement this new rule in a positive way as an organic sector. So from our point of view, the reorganization of well-established organic smallholder supply chains into separate legal entities risks to jeopardize business relations, historically grown social structures and organizational structures, and to some extent even the organic control integrity, because there will be a lot of confusion, at least in the initial years, how all this is meant to work. We expect significantly increased certification costs for many groups, but not for all. And the extent of increase depends heavily on the type of group, its size, and quite many factors. So there is no generic rule, but overall, we really expect the certification costs to increase, but less so for very small and simple groups, or maybe not at all. There is also concern about lower profitability and increased business risk of organic exports to the EU due to high initial adaptation costs and higher operating costs, as well as certification costs, while prices in Europe stagnate at the moment, or suppliers or customers are even expecting prices to lower. And of course, this is a challenging squeeze on producers. And at the same time, it's risky because products, there is a risk of certificates of inspection not being issued, or short-term disruptions before organic products can be shipped, or if they can be imported, if there is any residues found, certification is put on hold, and all this increases the business risk of organic exporters, basically. And the last challenge is that the compliance approach is very tricky, especially as understanding and complying with the detailed and complex legal European rules is very challenging for groups worldwide. This regulation really is not easy to read. And I hope that with this guidance, we can provide some initial help on this, but groups will need technical, financial, and legal support to adapt. Next. So what's this definition? Let's get started with the tricky bits in that one article we're talking about. Next. So the definition of group of operators is in the famous article 36.1. And during a recent trainings, my colleagues in Tunisia even called me Madame Article 36 for that reason, because that is the majority of the time that I've been spending on this one article of the regulation that defines a group of operators. So a group of operators, and this now is the simplified definition, is composed of members who are farmers committed to organic production under a maximum farm size or organic turnover limit, which we're going to discuss, smaller than or up to a maximum of 2,000 members per group of operators. The group of operators has to have legal personality, operate an internal control systems, has a system of joint marketing, and members shall be in geographic proximity, and one member shall only register for one group of operators for a given product. Now, this is condensed, but for each of these topics, we're going to have a brief discussion what it actually means, because the devil's in the detail. Next. So Article 36.1a defines that a group of operators shall only be composed of members who are farmers or operators that produce algae or agriculture animals, and who in addition may be engaged in processing, preparation, and placing on the market. So at first, this is easy. Yes, the members should be farmers, all right, and they're also allowed to do some preparation and processing in addition to being farmers mainly. But this is further complicated by the fact that each member in a group of operators is also considered an operator, a farm operator. So a member needs to also commit to compliance with the EU regulation and is responsible for compliance with the EU regulation. So essentially, the member has to be an organic or in conversion farmer from the beginning of conversion onwards. So in combination with the requirement that the group of operators shall have legal personality, it's this clause 36.1a that has the most fundamental legal and organizational implications, which we're going to discuss in the next section. But let's look at the rest of the definition first. Next. There is a new maximum farm size or organic turnover restriction in the regulation. The original text is quite complicated to read, and in the version of the webinar that you'll receive, there is in the PDF, there are some technical reading slides that give the backgrounds for some of the simplifications, like this one showing the original the original wording of the regulation and explaining how we came to this simplified version, which at least has stayed the same for the last 2 years. So it holds, and it held even beyond the issue of the last frequently asked question. All countries worldwide where the individual certification cost for a farm, say a farm that is certified each year individually by an organic CB, if the cost of certification is higher than 500 euro per year, which is the case in fundamentally all countries where group certification is practiced, the rules can be massively simplified. For group of operator membership, the farmer must be up to a maximum size of 5 hectares of total land holding, and or smaller than 25,000 euros, have less than 25,000 euros organic turnover. So effectively, if you look to the right, if you need to check the size of a farm in your group to consider whether that farmer qualifies, is eligible for group of operator membership and certification, the first question you could ask yourself is a simple one. Is the total holding smaller or equal to 5 hectares? This refers to all land managed by the member for agricultural production, including the non-organic or other agricultural areas. If the farmer is smaller than 5 hectares, which most farmers are certified in groups, then you don't need to check anything else. That member is eligible to be member in a group and certified there. If the farmer is larger, and this does happen in some crops and countries, there is quite a few farmers who are beyond the 5 hectare limit, then you need to check the turnover of organic production to assess whether the turnover is smaller or not more than 25,000 euro per year. If the farmer is actually beyond that limit, he or she is effectively a rather large farmer in effect, and this farm is not eligible to be a group of operator member and needs individual certification. However, if the turnover is smaller than 25,000 euros, then the farm is eligible. And by now, in the last couple of years, during trainings, we have been doing quite a lot of assessments of farms to check these new rules. And in many, many countries, it doesn't create as many problems as one would have expected in the beginning, because many farms that have more than 5 hectare land, or say in Africa, a fruit farmer with even quite a few hectares under mango, he's still far away from the organic turnover threshold of 25,000 euro. So in effect, over the years now of explaining the rule, our conclusion has been that it hits less farms than originally thought, but it will exclude some farmers, and some crops and countries will be more affected than others by this new restriction. But actually, by allowing both the maximum hectare size or the turnover to be factors, it's a rather reasonable and well-written rule, I think, in practice. Next. There have been a lot of questions and clarification what is meant by the members' organic turnover. So it's the annual value of organic sales to the group. There is the problem of sudden fluctuations because of sales volumes, price changes, exchange rates. Yes, this is all true, but the ICS will have to define rules and procedures to ensure members' eligibility, and these will be reviewed and approved by ESUB. And we would recommend to, as a group, to apply a safety margin in your internal membership groups, because it will be a whole mess if you have in and out of the members. And yeah, we can't really expect flexibility there, that just because the exchange rate changes significantly, the rules won't apply. So it's something that we recommend to manage carefully as a group best you can. Next. As I already explained, it's the maximum farm size restriction to 5 hectares. It means the members holding, so all production units operated by the member for the purpose of producing agricultural products. This means the organic field as well as non-organic or fallow land for rotation. Forest plots are not included unless they're used for producing, for example, agriculture products are essentially, again, used for agricultural purposes. So the interesting question is, What about larger farms? If you are a cooperative and you have farmers that are clearly beyond that size limit, so they are bigger than 5 hectares and the organic turnover is over 25,000 euro a year, this farm can't be a group of operator member. To sell as organic, the farm needs to be certified, controlled and certified as an organic farm by SCB. The farmer can also not remain statutory member of the group of operator entity. This is one of the questions the EU Commission has just clarified in one of the frequently asked questions, which again in the PDF version of this webinar, you'll see the original text the Commission has written on that. But essentially, it's clear the farmer cannot remain statutory member. So as a cooperative, you essentially have 2 options. Either you exclude all larger farms from statutory membership, if that is doable. In some cooperatives, it's not possible. Or there is a need for a new legal group of entity, a legal entity as a group of operator for just the small farmers within that cooperative, which may be the case also for other reasons. So this is again sort of the implications that we're going to discuss. Yeah. Next. The maximum size of a group of operators is also is a challenge, in particular in Africa, where there is many large groups, but also in Latin America, there are not many, but there are some very large groups and they can involve a large number of farmers. So it still will have quite an impact on quite many farmers, although it's a low number of groups. So any currently certified groups with more than 2,000 members will need to set up new, smaller legal entity or use existing smaller legal entities that fit the group of operator definition to be certified as a group of operator. And each such smaller group of operator units, each new legal unit or existing legal entity will need legal personality and be composed of only organic and in conversion farmers. It is not acceptable that subunits of a cooperative share the legal personality of the cooperative. Each group of operator must have own legal personality. This is something we have always said the last 2 years, but it's also been clarified recently in the frequently asked question document. This group size rule is the only rule where the regulation itself has foreseen a transition period until the end of 2024. So any group that is very large, say a cooperative or a union with 20,000 farmers, can still be certified in 2024 because that rule doesn't apply to them yet. But from 2025 onwards, they have to comply with that rule for certification. Next. So each group of operators shall have its own legal personality. And this is also one of the aspects that has been discussed and debated quite intensely. What does it mean, the legal personality, and what does it mean with own legal personality? And here also the Commission has issued a clarification that legal personality is not defined in the regulation itself further, but it applies to entities that are recognized by national law as having legal distinct identity as well as legal rights and duties, and are thus able to do things in law that a natural person can do according to the laws of that country. If we try to simplify this, but still stick a bit more to a legal jargon, as this will be important for the thousands of new legal entities that will need to be set up, the group of operators shall be a legal entity recognized by national law as having rights and obligations. This is apparently how lawyers phrase it. And apparently, we have been told, depending on national law, there may be some forms of legal personality that are recognized without registration. So we've corrected everything to not say it has to be a registered legal entity, but it has to be recognized by national law as having legal rights and duties and a distinct identity. What's also important in that context is another clarification by the Commission that the regulation does not prevent a group of operators from participating in the membership of other types of farmers association or arrangement such as cooperative subject to all provisions. So this means effectively that the group of operator legal entity may be a member in another organization or may have contractual or cooperative obligation towards another entity. This is not restricted. And in effect, we expect that many of these new entities will have very close collaborative agreements of various sorts that link them to, for example, the currently certified cooperative or traders. But this is not regulated in the regulation itself. It's this legal unit's own contractual obligations or rights towards other units. So it's private law. Next. So what kind of legal personality is acceptable for a group of operators? And in principle, the answer is now the group of operator can have any form of legal personality recognized by national law as having rights and obligation and a distinct identity. However, we would like to point out that the legal entity should also be composed only of members who are farmers, which is the other requirement of Article 36(1). And obviously this does restrict the legal forms more importantly than just the legal personality definition. And we would also like to remind groups who are now have to consider what legal form they will take on, that the legal form should permit to exclude members easily. For example, if they are no longer organic or become too big for group of operator certification, the new rules imply that they have to also exit the legal entity as members, which makes the administration a good deal more complex. But this is how the new rules are. And as mentioned, the new entity may have contractual or cooperative relationships with another legal entity. For example, an example that has often been given as a potentially good idea is that in case of a cooperative which has organic as well as non-organic statutory members, the new legal entity could be, for example, a recognized association of organic cooperative members, where the cooperative membership is a pre-requirement for being in the association, and the products are marketed exclusively through the association, through the cooperative. So there's a very close collaboration, but the association is itself legally recognized, and that means it can be certified as a group of operators. And we've collected various examples in different countries of legal forms that this could take. Next. The preparation activities in a group of operators have also been a subject of intense discussion, because the definition of the group of operators mentions preparation mainly in the context that farmers can also be engaged in preparation and processing. But all farmers associations or organizations essentially perform at least some preparation activities after collecting or receiving the products from their members. For example, sorting, grading, mixing, packaging, sometimes also central processing like drying products, cutting and drying mangoes, for example, as part of their joint marketing system. And it was unclear whether this would be permitted. So here the European Commission's answer is very helpful, that a group of operators certified as organic in the EU or a third country can perform any activity, including preparation, under the group certification. So this has been very, very helpful, that at least this potential problem got out of the way finally. Next. Still with the definition, we're still not finished. I'm telling you, Article 36(1) is a tricky one, is the geographic proximity. The group of operators shall be composed of members whose production activities take place in geographic proximity to each other in the same member state or same third country. So we often get asked, are there any new detailed requirements on geographic proximity? And the answer is no. There is no specific new criteria. Geographic proximity has been required for group certification since more than 20 years. It's evaluated by the control body, and there is no new specific criteria for evaluating whether this criteria is met. However, we would like to add that geographic proximity is very important for a well-working and efficient internal control system, and that each group of operators will need to demonstrate that their ICS is adequate. For example, if farmers are grouped in regional clusters, there'll be additional focus or additional risk focus to ensure that both the ICS is up to this and the external control is verifying this. And what we noticed is that a lot of large projects who run regional clusters of farms effectively now, with the change, if farmers have to be grouped in new kind of farmers associations and so on, we have noticed that for practical reason, many of larger projects that operate in different parts of the countries will be more likely organized in smaller regional groups anyway to have more association between the farmers. So this is a side effect that this is likely to change also for other reasons than just the criterion of geographic proximity. Next. So can group of operator members sell to different buyers, or can a farmer be member in more than one group of operator? There is now a clear explicit rule that a member of a group of operators shall register only for one group of operator for a given product. So if you look at the example above, a farmer could be member in one group of operators for the mangoes he grows for, saying, making mango pulp, and he could be member in another group of operator for coffee because it's two different products. And sometimes it's actually helpful to have that flexibility. We'd also like to point out that this is higher risk and needs very careful management by the ICS to ensure that still all organic rules are met, but this is what the rules say. And the same applies to sales to local traders. Almost all certified organic smallholders sell also locally to local traders. Obviously, and just to state this again explicitly, these products sold to local traders are not certified organic because only sales through the group are covered in a group certification. And the ICS would need to monitor such sales and consider them in the traceability system that they apply. Next. So what are the implications for already certified groups? Now comes the nitty-gritty bit, or what we have already been mentioned, what I've mentioned already briefly in the summary section. What does it mean? Next. So as I said, it's now a completely new concept. Some groups meet the new requirements, but the majority will need to set up new legal entity or identify existing eligible entities to be certified as a group of operator in the future. So to discuss the implication, let's take two cases separately. And of course, this is a simplification, but roughly we have one type of currently certified farmer groups that are farmer cooperative societies or other forms of registered or recognized farmers organizations. So these farmer organizations are legally composed of farmers. So they do meet this definition from that point of view. But it's still the problem that many certified organizations do not meet the new EU group of operator definition because they have also non-organic statutory members, or because they have some members that are too large according to the new regulation. So this is what is sort of the new problem that we weren't fully aware of in the past 2 years for producer groups. The other group is a processor or exporter organized group, which is often also referred to as contract production. So it's a company that has contracts, that organizes small farmers, trains them in organic farming, buys the products from them, runs the ICS and exports the product. These are currently also certified as a group. But this type of setup was already clear from the beginning that it's not considered to be in line with the definition of a group of operator, as the certified legal entity is not composed of farmers. Now, interestingly, this question has not even been asked in the frequently asked question document of the EU Commission. And this is because this has been so clear since the beginning. And yeah, it's just that a trader itself, the legal entity, is not composed of farmers, so it doesn't meet the definition. It can't be certified as a group of operators. Next. But let's look closer at the implications for farmers. We should change this to recognized farmers organizations. Recognized farmer organization, for example, a cooperative or a farmers association of any sort, is composed of farmers and can be certified as a group of operators if it has up to a maximum or less than 3,000 members, but only if the farmers organization is composed only of farmers committed to compliance with the EU organic rules. That means essentially it is composed only of farmers who are already organic or in conversion, who have just committed to start conversion. I mean, that would be the third category. And all statutory members would need to be under the new farm size and turnover limit. And obviously it also would need the organization needs to be recognized under national law. This means that a farmers organization, a cooperative, for example, which currently also has non-organic or too large, and as I've just explained, statutory members cannot be certified as a group of operator in its current structure. The cooperative can, however, be certified as an operator, company and operator for preparation and export, and can establish a legal entity as group of operators, which is composed of eligible organic and in conversion members. As an operator, so if you think the cooperative is not certified as group of operator, but as a preparation and export operator, it can have as many non-organic members and activity as it likes, but there is the need for this additional unit of the group of operators that is only composed of small farmers committed to organic production. Next. Now, obviously, this is a complex rule and it's completely new, and it's hard to get to terms what this means and how, more importantly, how it can be implemented in practice, because this is we're talking about thousands of cooperatives. Probably some part of the world will be more affected than others, but yeah, it will be thousands of cooperatives that are affected by this new rule. So let's try to understand it a bit better what it means. So for example, a cooperative has 300 organic and 100 non-organic statutory members. We've been certified EU and NOP since 10 years. Can we be certified as a group of operators? No. The answer is no. According to the EU interpretation, as just manifested in the frequently asked question document, says clearly that a cooperative with non-organic statutory members cannot become certified as group of operators. All statutory members of the legal group of operator unit must meet the eligibility criteria, all criteria of Article 36(1). That means they must be farmer, they must be under the maximum size turnover limit, comply with organic rules, be in geographic proximity, and so on. So if you take that example in the frequently asked question example, as also I tried to show in the illustration on the left side, this cooperative cannot be certified as a group of operators, but it can be certified as an operator for preparation and export of organic products from the separate new certified group of operator or of other operators. And for example, in this example, the organic subgroup, at the moment, it doesn't have its own legal personality, so it can't be certified, but this subgroup could, of the organic farmers of that cooperative, could be certified if it had its own legal personality. For example, if there is an association of organic cooperative members that is recognized by national law as having legal personality, then this association would be the certified group of operators that meets the definition of the EU regulation. Next. So now let's look at the implications for processor and exporter organized groups. Essentially, these remain the same as we have communicated them before. The certification of a trader with his associated contracted smallholder farmers as one group is no longer possible under the new regulation. So there is a need for a new farmer group or an existing pharma group that is composed of farmers and meets all the other definition criteria as a group of operators, which will have its own separate group of operator certificate. And then the processor trader will be certified as an operator just for the preparation and export activities, and can obviously buy and export the products from this new group of operators. So on the market side, it won't show because it's still exported under the name of the processor and trader. Next. There is also a third form of group certification, which we haven't explained before, but it is also internationally important, and it's important to clarify what the new rules mean. There is a form of group certification that is sometimes called 100% control without ICS. So it's essentially smallholder farmers associated to a trader or a processor that are certified under one certificate and without a formal internal control system, but with 100% external inspection. So the certification is managed and paid and organized by the trader. 100% of farms are inspected by the control body each year. There is no formal ICS, but there is usually training, technical support, regular visits to quality control and logistics. So this form has had 100% control, but then one certificate still for the group. And this form also is no longer possible under the new regulation. So group control certification with 100% external control will no longer be possible under the new regulation. Either the group of operator legal entities are set up with an ICS. I mean, it's just the same as the case before. A new group of operator is set up and it's externally controlled as a group of operator. Or the other option for these projects is to change to individual certification for each farmer, which, if the farmers are rather large and complex, is also an interesting option actually that empowers farmers and enables them to sell to different buyers over time. And in some cases, it may actually make sense for a country to change more towards a system of individual farm certification, same as the system in Europe, where even though group of operator certification is now permitted, we don't expect that many groups will at all exist because of the advantages of individual certification if there is more organic farms in the country. Next. So what are the risks and challenges associated of setting up a new separate group? And I mean, the problem we have already explained to processors and traders, that they need to form a new legal entity for the smallholders. And of course, all companies who engaged in that process and started the process, it's ferociously complex and feels risky and challenging in the beginning because this is a new farmers organization. They're new and inexperienced. They lack capital and management capabilities. How can we expect them to run the ICS or business operations and actually buy the products from the organic farmers reliably? So this is an effective challenge. And what we found is that it requires careful analysis of the situation and dialogue between the company and farmers. There is no solution that fits all. Each company, each supply chain will have to find its own unique solution effectively with farmers. It also depends very much on the interaction with farmers, but it's very important that you find a solution that ensures organic integrity and functional business operation, especially, for example, that the organic products are purchased at the onset of harvest so that there is enough finance to actually start purchase on time to sort of limit the risks otherwise. What is also interesting is that the regulation allows some operational flexibility for this type of setup. So the ICS can be operated, it can be external of the group of operator legal entity. It could be operated by the company in case of contract production if the new group of operator appoints staff of the company as the ICS manager and ICS inspector. And the group of operator is also responsible for joint marketing, could be It's responsible for joint marketing of the members' products, but it could subcontract processes to a partner company, for example, the collection or transport or running the traceability system to make this maybe a bit more operational. And the company and the new group of operator unit can have, as we discussed before, private contracts on rights and duties of both sides. If there is anything sort of complex regarding certification, you're advised to coordinate with the CB, because again, at the end, your CB will need to assess whether you meet the group of operator requirements in that new legal setup, which will be a complex task in the next couple of years, I think, for CBs. Next. Another question we often had was, can a union of cooperatives be certified as a group of operators? And here the answer also changed a bit now that we have the new Commission's answer, because most currently certified unions or association of cooperatives, so second or third degree farmers societies, are very unlikely to meet the new group of operator definition anyway, as they also have non-organic farmers as their primary society members, or many also have more than 2,000 members in total. So they can't be certified as group of operators also for other reasons. So most cooperative unions we expect will also be certified as an operator for preparation and export, marketing the products from different group of operator entities. So on the right, you see an example of an adaptation example. For example, the cooperative union forms a new registered, recognized association for all eligible organic primary society members as the new group of operator legal entity. And then this association that is composed only of the organic primary society members meets the group of operator definition, operates the ICS, and can be certified as a group of operator. The products are marketed through the cooperative union, which will be the operator for preparation and export. Or another solution for a cooperative union is that if the primary society are fully organic anyway, then the certification, the future group of operator will be the primary society. If the primary society is fully organic, that would be by far the easiest solution, because it's a legal entity that already exists. And the cooperative union can still, depending on the size, either provide ICS services or at least provide technical support to the local ICS team of each primary society. And anyway, they'll be in charge of marketing and selling the product and sort of giving background advice. We also want to point out that there may be unions that meet the new group of operator definitions, especially if small organic cooperatives associate for the purpose of forming a larger group of operator unit according to EU specification. We just wanted to explain that I don't think many existing unions will just tick the box, even less so than most certified cooperatives at the moment. Next. So the future setup we expect for a large number, majority of currently certified groups, is that they will need to change their organizational and legal setup to continue group certification for export to the EU beyond 1st of January 2025. So just to say this again, all contract production groups and all farmers organizations that do not meet the new group of operator composition or size rules. So in future, we expect that most groups that are certified under one certificate right now and one legal entity, in case of a cooperative, will be, in fact, two separate certificates for two separate legal entities. A new farmer group or another existing farmer group newly certified as a group of operators, and either the cooperative or the currently certified company acting as the operator for preparation and export of the products to the European market. So on the market side, you might not even see these changes because the products will be sold under the same name of the currently certified cooperative or company, but instead of being under one certificate under one unit, there'll be at least two, often multiple certificates, because often the split means that effectively there is more than one group of operators for various reasons than under the main company or cooperative. As we mentioned, sometimes existing legal entities may be suitable and could be identified to be turned into the future certified group of operators, but it's still a change of the legal and organizational setup for these groups. What the currently certified company and pharma organization can do is still, as I said, provide support, ICS support, for example, to the new group of operator entity if the group of operator appoints the current ICS team as its ICS manager and ICS inspector. It could also be subcontracted by the group of operator for other activities so that it can effectively perform similar activities than now, but the whole setup will still be more complex. Next. Oh, I have met my time limit up to now. I hope you're still there. I know it's heavy. It's also been a lot of work to discuss and understand all this. And yeah, I apologize. When we move to the second part, where I summarize the ICS requirements and the organic production rules, I want to mention that some of the slides they're definitely much heavier than what I would normally present in a webinar. And this is because there is so little, if no, easily accessible summary information available about the new regulation that we had to include quite a few details into the guidance itself. And we have seen in the last 2 years that it's also used a lot for self-study. So I'm not going to read out all details shown on the slides, but see it mainly as something you can refer to if you want to dig deeper into a certain topic, because it will refer you to the right part of the regulation where you can read up more, and it will help you to gain an overview, and some of it you might need to read after the actual webinar, because yeah, also the organic production rules, we could have a discussion for hours about them or even days. Next. So this is just an overview where the ICS requirements are in the new regulation. As you can see, it's not even in one part, it's in different parts. So it's helpful that we provide an overview, I think. Next. So to give you an overview, as I said, the ICS requirements are nothing fundamentally new. If you have had a quality, let's say, I-form-aligned ICS for the last years, you will be in a very good place to update your ICS fairly easily according to the new requirements. You will still need to update it probably, because now the procedures and the rules are quite detailed. So you'll have to, it's almost like a checkbox working through your ICS manual, making sure you're aligned and tick all the boxes, but hopefully it shouldn't be too difficult. So you have to have documented procedures. There is clear requirements regarding the ICS manager, who plays a key role in ICS inspectors. There is a long list of documents and compulsory records, and even like all the details that have to be featured in your members list. There is not much, but still a rule about internal inspection, the key element of any internal control system. There is clear rules about managing non-compliances and notice to the control body if members are suspended or decertified, rules on managing traceability and product flow, as well as farmers training. Next. So the ICS procedures, this is just giving you an overview, and ICS should have documented procedures. I mean, this is commonly done in an ICS manual that then serves as your documented procedures. Through these procedures, this is the place where you can show compliance to your CB, to the new rules and how you implement them. And it will also help you and guide you if these procedures are approved by the CB. You have a good operating basis to operate in line with the new regulation. And I recommend you to list to read the list of ICS procedures in Article 31G, as it contains many relevant details, but this is only relevant, obviously, if you're an ICS group and need to align your ICS. Next. The ICS manager and ICS inspector. The ICS manager is given a key role in the new regulation, and he or she has various responsibilities that essentially require a senior position in the organization, because it's decision and supervision of staff. So it's really a management role. And we have noticed that it's actually quite tricky, especially for farmers cooperatives, if currently they have sort of, say, low-level field technicians designated as ICS manager. It will be kind of hard that this person takes on all the responsibility the regulation expects from the ICS manager. So this is something to bear in mind for aligning the ICS, that you make sure that the ICS, whoever is appointed as ICS manager, may be in tandem with other senior members of the groups or other senior management, has the authority, at least in combination with somebody else, to take all this responsibility that the regulation has defined. The group of operator also needs to appoint a sufficient number of competent ICS inspectors for annual inspection, and there is an annual training that is compulsory with assessment of knowledge acquired. Next. There is also, as to be expected, a long list of compulsory ICS documents and records. They all make sense, and if you have a well-working ICS, I hope you have them essentially, but please be aware that there are some new details that you might need to work through to make sure that you actually do have all details for each document on record, and that maybe some training or conflicts of interest records that you haven't kept before, so you still need to align. I want to highlight that there is also more information compulsory in the members list, including full information on each production unit. So that means the organic unit as well as the non-organic unit or conversion unit, so size, location, crops, begin of conversion, yield estimate. All this applies also to the non-organic unit of the farmer. Next. The internal ICS inspection. Actually, there is not a lot of detail on this in the regulation. It's just stated that the ICS has to annually inspect 100% of members each year, and the date of the ICS inspection needs to be indicated in the list of members. But obviously, your ICS internal inspection has to cover all relevant production rules and be essentially a mini external farm inspection visit, including an interview with the farmer, which is compulsory, including yield estimate. Important is also to check ICS data, whether this is actually what the data you have on file for your farmers is the same that you find and see in the field. You do a field visit of the organic and conversion unit and spot check of non-organic unit. You have to check inputs, identify risk and measures taken to avoid contamination, and inspect the post-harvest activities. And we recommend as IFOAM for risk reasons and in terms of strengthening the ICS so that you really are aware of all problems in your group, and not only when the external inspector comes, that inspections should take place at different times of the year to cover risk throughout the production season. So not only all internal inspection 2 months before the external control, which always comes at the same time of the year. And there is details compulsory for the inspection report. Next. So that's already what I mentioned in planning the internal inspections. The ICS manager has to define a schedule, and we recommend that inspections should take place at different times of the production season to cover different risks, so that you actually identify all problems yourself, because as we will discuss, the expectations are really high. You really run into problems if there is if the external control shows that your ICS is not efficient. The certificate for the whole group has to be revoked, as it always should have been, but hasn't always been. Next. So what about what happens after the inspection. So you have to, it's now also written very clearly that any ICS shall have documented procedures on measures in case of non-compliance is detected during the internal inspection, including their follow-up, and procedures on approval of new members or new units activity by the ICS manager on basis of the internal inspection report. There's also additional rules in the 279 that the ICS manager must notify the control body of any suspicion of major or critical non-compliance and or of any suspension or withdrawal of a member. So this is also something important to keep in mind. This obligation, in my view, has also become stronger than what's common practice. And it's maybe interesting for you to read the definitions, because there is new EU categories for non-compliances, a sort of definition, what's a minor, a major, and a critical. It's not very defined. It's still sort of up for evaluation, but it still helps. And your third country CBs will develop a catalog of measures with these three non-compliance categories, and obviously your CB's catalog of measures will somehow influence what the ICS will be expected to implement inside the group. And just to remind you, you have to take records of the measures that you take in case of non-compliance, because this will be inspected as well during the external inspection. Next. As we all know, or hopefully know, traceability and product flow control are key in a group of operator in any group certification. So now this is more explicitly written. The ICS shall comprise documented procedures on the internal traceability, which shows the origin of the product and allows the tracing of all products of all members throughout all stages. It should also include the estimation and cross-checking of yields of each member. Now, this has been best practice since more than 25 years, but it's still good to see that in writing, as it's an important factor. What is new is that the new requirements extend the ICS responsibility beyond the member's delivery to purchase center. The ICS stays responsible for traceability until sales by the group of operator legal entity. So if it's within a fully organic cooperative, the ICS stays responsible until export to the EU. So this is a bit new in terms of the focus. And there is a link to different records and documents on that have to be met for this point. Next. There's also a new requirement that the ICS shall have a procedure for training of group of operator members on ICS procedures and the requirements of the EU organic regulation, and that this training of members shall be recorded. And of course, this is something also as FIBO that we are thrilled about. I mean, good farmers training and ongoing support is key, and practical field activities and explanations work best. And we recommend that you implement an adequate risk-based training procedure. It doesn't say, I mean, if you read the legal requirement, it doesn't say annual training, and definitely there might be a need for a more comprehensive training in organic production than just reading out the EU rules to your farmers, because ultimately this is not only ticking the box, but also making sure that your farmers do understand and apply the organic rules in their farming system. All forms of training are acceptable. You just need to record them. Next. So now we're at the part where we discuss some of the new organic production rules, mainly with the focus of being applied to group of operators and not farms in general. Next. So the key changes there, as I already said, the most rules for plant production in particular have not changed materially from the old regulation. However, since now most producers need to comply with the EU rules, many rules will be experienced as stricter, and this also depends on how strict your CB has been in the past. But in addition to this general change, there is also a couple of actual changes, the ICS needs to register and check the members' entire farm holding with all production units and activities, including the non-organic fields and activities. Depending on your CP, this has been done in the past, or it hasn't, I learned. There is also stricter procedures for authorizing exceptions, for example, for non-organic planting material, retroactive recognition, as well as for parallel production, and stricter rules on soil fertility management, pest and weed management, which we're going to discuss, and a new list of authorized substances and additional restrictions for plant protection. So our summary focuses on plant products because this is more than 99% of what groups export to the EU. Next. So we've been talking about production units, and compared to older versions, the new regulation uses this term very, very clearly. And it's clear that the ICS also needs to control the entire holding of the farmer used for agricultural production under that member's management. And the rule is that the whole holding shall be managed organically. Alternatively, it may be split in clearly and effectively separate production units, which means all assets of a holding, including land parcels and premises for primary production and storage. So you will have for each member an organic production unit, and all crops in this unit must be managed in line with the organic production rules. This means all intercrops and an organic coffee field need to be also managed organically. Should be a reality, but depending on what you currently apply, maybe you need to strengthen your ICS in that regard. And all land for the production of organic crops should be in the organic unit, including rotation land, because if you grow your organic vegetables this year on this plot and next year on the neighboring plot, then this plot needs to be organic and managed organically so that you can rotate to the other plot. And what's new too is that the in-conversion unit needs to be also systematically separated from the organic unit. So if a farmer has both conversion and organic fields, it means that he has to keep separation between the conversion unit and the organic unit, although in both units he applies the same organic production rules. And then a member may have a non-organic production unit, and this is still permitted even for members of a group of operators. Usually the non-organic activities should be other crops, and it tends to be the crops not sold to the group of operator. For example, the organic coffee farmers have in a different region a non-organic maize field that they sell on the local market and use for home consumption. So it has to be on clearly separate defined land parcels. There has to be strict separation of activities and avoiding contamination, and this has to be checked by the ICS. And also the new members list sort of requires this very clearly, that the ICS need to register the entire farm holding and also give the details of all production units, not only the organic unit. Now the question is about parallel production. So what if it is actually the same crop on the organic unit? And the next slide, please. So here. So a farmer shall not grow the same certified organic crop, at least not an easily distinguishable variety, in the organic or conversion and the non-organic farm unit. So this can be often referred to as no parallel production by the members. So for example, all fields with cocoa trees, if the group of operators sells organic cocoa, then all fields with any cocoa trees on it should be in the organic unit and managed fully organically. In your example that you see here, it's an organic mango farm, and it means that both the fields should be managed organically. Otherwise, we have the problem of parallel production. There is an exceptional rule that parallel production can be authorized by the CB, but only for perennial crops, only for a maximum of 5 years until the last plot is organic with a conversion plan, and under strict conditions for notification of each harvest period to the CB. There is detailed rule in 9.8. And when I discussed this with some of my colleagues in Asia and also with others, it became clear that actually these rules have become stricter, and they are quite strict, because if you consider the 5 years maximum, it means that after 2 years, a farmer with parallel production has to already start to change the farming practices to organic for all of his field. So this is an important new limitation. And in any case, I personally don't recommend parallel production in a group of operators, because it's very high risk. It requires increased control. Most ICS are unable to meet all these detailed conditions and manage the high risks in a meaningful way. So it's not a recommended thing, but I just wanted to point out that it is possible according to the regulation. And I also want to stress again that although it's not logical, a member in a group of operator may have a non-organic unit, although the group of operators cannot be composed of non-organic farmers. So there is the case that a group of operators actually could have also non-organic products produced by its members who are committed to organic production. So this is not entirely logic, and so we get asked about it a lot. The group cannot be composed of non-organic farmers, but an organic member in the group can have a non-organic field or non-organic production units if separation and everything else is guaranteed and ensured. Next. The conversion period and retroactive recognition of the conversion period. The conversion period itself has not changed, but there are stricter and more detailed requirements on authorizing retroactive recognition, to the extent that in the EU, it even has to be authorized by the competent authority. It can't even be authorized by the CB anymore. In third countries, it's still the CBs who can grant retroactive recognition of a previous period as part of the conversion period, but only under strict conditions. So there's now a long list of detailed conditions, including a long list of documents to be provided by the operator to prove that the land was natural or not treated with unpermitted substances for the last 3 years, including maps, geolocation, photos, details of current production, and the requirement that the CB shall carry out a risk analysis, risk-based sampling, and provide an inspection report after physical inspection to verify consistency of the information. And obviously, retroactive recognition of conversion can only be authorized by the CB after the verification. So it's nothing the ICS manager, in case of a new member, can decide internally and already treat that farmer as an organic farmer, for example, just because it's proposed for retroactive approval. Next. For seeds and plant reproductive material, again, the rules have become much more detailed, and the EU tried to restrict derogations and essentially push or promote that more organic planting material is used and that there are less exceptions. But for third countries, there is still the derogation that non-organic untreated seeds and reproductive planting materials can be used, but only after annual authorization to the group of operator by the CB and under specific conditions, and seedlings must be grown from seeds using organic methods. You can't have non-organic seedlings used there is no derogation for non-organic seedlings that have been raised with non-organic methods from seed. So the ICS should essentially inform members and control that only organic or conversion seeds or approved untreated non-organic seeds are used within the group in organic fields. And just to point this out, this is always a tricky issue, and many groups, if it's say cotton or another annual crop where farmers need to source seeds, they tend to source seeds as a group, because otherwise it's very hard to ensure this in third countries in reality, that all the conditions are met and the quality is all right. Next. So for soil management and plant nutrition, the rules are very similar. I've just given the reference, but what's important to note is that there is a clear rule for annual crops to have multi-annual crop rotation, including leguminous crops. So that's compulsory. And for perennial crops, the regulation talks about plant diversity and use of short-term green manure and legumes as a requirement. And again, external inputs should be kept to the minimum. Next. For organic pest and weed management, in particular to smallholders, I've given an overview, but the principles are very much the same. It's just even more explicit than before, that only where these preventive measures, cultural and crop monitoring, crop rotation, biodiversity promotion, and so on, only where these preventive measures are not sufficient, or in case of established threat to the crops, the products and substances authorized in the 1165, the new regulation that lists the authorized inputs, may be used. Next. So what about the authorized farm inputs? There is a new list of authorized substances that can be used. It's the 1165. The same list now applies to EU and worldwide, so countries, and there is not any flexibility to adapt to local conditions. So all the restrictions and specifications in that list apply one-to-one also to third countries, no exceptions. So it means only listed substances may be used, and only for the crops and the use specified in the list. For example, ethylene is currently permitted to be used in potatoes, but it means also that it's not permitted in pineapple anymore, although there are efforts to sort of get it relisted also for pineapple. But just to point this out as an example, if there is a restriction listed on the right side of the table, this restriction applies as it is written also to a third country. And this is something where the new rules will feel stricter already in that regard. Another complexity that is new and potentially really difficult for the international organic production is that for use for plant protection purposes, the exact substance used must be listed in both the Organic Regulation Annex, the 1165, but the same substance must also be authorized for use in EU agriculture in general. So basically be listed in the EU pesticide database, which is a very heavy registration procedure. And the EU authorization is extremely specific, in fact. So for microorganisms, the authorization is per strain of microorganism. So for BT, you have maybe 15 different strains that are authorized, and the new rules would mean that a different strain than those authorized in the EU can't be automatically used. And of course, this is challenging, especially in tropical countries that has completely different microorganisms than the EU currently uses. Alternatively, there is the option that is per Article 10 of the 1165 regulation, a substance can be requested to be added to the annex for use only in third countries based on a detailed technical dossier. And we expect that over the next couple of years, there will be larger manufacturer of biocontrol agents. They will probably engage in some kind of process to get the majority of widely used products somehow added to the third country annex, but it's a big endeavor. It's an expensive and complex process. And effectively, this point will also be a challenge for many locally produced plant-based pesticides, because there will be the need for some official approval in the EU as well. What's important for groups is that you should really ensure to have the CB authorization of the product used before allowing members to use it. And according to feeble experience, some plant protection products may no longer be accepted. So it's good to check proactively with your CB, and this is going to materialize in the next couple of years. And again, the tip that many groups source approved farm inputs jointly and supply them to members in order to manage this in a good way as a group. Next. We often had also questions on livestock, beekeeping, and agriculture in groups of operators. And just to summarize this, it's clear that Article 36.1 allows group of operator certification of farmers as well as aquaculture operators. And since livestock production is defined as agricultural activity, any livestock producer is a farmer and can be certified in a group of operators. Specifically, beekeeping can be certified in a group of operators. This is even confirmed in an old frequently asked question of the Commission. And I give you the reference to the production rules. But what's important to note is that honey production cannot be certified as wild harvest. Wild harvest only applies to plants. So it has to be a formal ICS. All ICS requirements have been met, all group of operator requirements, as well as all organic honey production requirements. And we've given some additional tips on this. Next. Wild collection, again, we sometimes were asked questions about it. The rules on wild collection, wild harvest of plants have not changed. As far as I can tell, definitely it's still possible to continue with classic wild collection in defined natural areas by collectors without cultivation measures. And this can be continued to be certified as a plant production under the wild collection rules. So no actual changes. But what is important to note is that there are some cases where the wild harvest, the wild collection actually has clearly agricultural activities involved. And so there may be cases that upon careful consideration, group of operator certification may be needed to ensure organic integrity. For example, if in case of shea, the collectors go and collect wild shea nuts, but at the same time, each farmer or each collector has also 20 shea trees right around the house on their farming land, which nuts they also collect. Or if a wild collection company contracts small farmers to grow some of the herbs for them in the garden, this is agricultural production and not wild collection. So again, either each grower must be certified, either as individual farm or in form of a group of operators. So this is just to clarify the distinction between wild collection and group of operator certification. Next. Internal traceability and product flow control. I mean, it's not only an ICS requirement, it's an important production rule as well. As I said, there is requirements to have clear ICS procedures on this. There's also several requirements on keeping records of the delivery of the products of each member in the joint marketing system, and there is high expectations in terms of traceability. And what's important too is that the ICS has to internally inspect all purchase centers each year. And effectively, the ICS has to make sure that all the traceability requirements and organic production rules are met during purchase and transport and internal handling. Next. So we also have talked about that farmers themselves do some simple processing and preparation activities before they sell or deliver their product to the group of operator collective marketing system. This can be simple drying of spices or processing of cocoa beans, for example, on the farm level before the product is sold. Of course, the same organic production rules and precautionary measures apply then at the farmer. And these have to be checked carefully by the ICS during the internal control. Please note that from 2024 or onwards, or 2025 then in third countries, there will be only specified new lists in the 1165. An annex that is currently empty will be added, which lists the substances that are allowed for cleaning and disinfection on farm, in processing and storage. So this will apply also to smallholder farmers in your group. And I think this annex is due to be published soon. And this will be important to include in your trainings to farmers, to also pay attention to the risk of contamination by use of unauthorized substances on the farm for disinfection or pest control reasons by the farmer. So this is something for the ICS to be aware of. Yes, next. Again, I've just summarized the lists, that the principles that apply for storage and preparation of organic products once the product is collected by the group of operators or by, say, the cooperative. Just to remind you of the different rules that apply. Hopefully there's nothing new to you there, but again, it's sort of just to show you where in the regulation you can find the respective information. And there is more details in the precautionary measures you have to take to avoid contamination. For example, if you run a farm gate collection system by lorry, there is very detailed measures to be taken by the collection driver in case the same lorry collects both, say, organic mangoes and non-organic mangoes in the same tour. There is very detailed rules in the regulation in Annex 3, what conditions need to be met for that. So that's why I'm referring those of you who are ICS managers to these rules. Next. So the last chapter now of this guidance, you're almost done, is about the key changes in external inspection. And this is a short chapter because this training is to give the overall overview and not to go into depth on the inspection process. Next. But to sum this up again, the new rules are that each group of operator has to be inspected at least once a year, plus there are unannounced checks that apply to all types of operators. The EU will define lists of high-risk products and countries, which will be inspected twice a year. So effectively, on average, each group of operators will be inspected more than once a year, right, is the result of this. And during each of these annual inspections, the certifier needs to re-inspect a minimum of 5% of the total number of group members each year, not less than 10. So for very small groups, the minimum will apply. So this increases the number of farm re-inspections for all groups with more than 400 members, but lowers the rates for the smaller groups between 100 and 400 members. And the cost effect of this is strongest for very large groups. Sort of medium-sized groups will not see a huge effect of this, but of course it's also a challenge for the certifiers because they have to recruit enough new staff to be able to do all these 5% of inspections. Compared to the square root approach for large groups, the difference is quite staggering. I mean, some CBs might need a whole month to certify some of the groups that are currently certified. Also the purchase and collection centers need to be covered in the external verification visit once a year. And just to point out, there is a new certificate format that will be issued via the Traces database. There is a defined format and content for third country. And the group of operator certificate will contain the list of members, somehow maybe as an annex, but it's sort of part of the certificate. So the members list might be publicly available information as well, which I think is good for transparency. There is also still the requirements of having certificates of inspection for each consignment to the EU. But because the certificate has a set format and is issued via the database, it's both more verifiable, but it also decreases the flexibility, right? Because I mean, it's only the official format. You can't really change anything in how you make your certificates. Whereas up to now, each CP had their own format and way how they issued the certificate and what information they put on the certificate. So all this will make the system, in combination with all these new rules, more strictly applied, because there is no other solution. I mean, you can't even do it otherwise, right? You can only issue the certificate in the set format, and deviations will show more easily because it's all in the same database. Next. The 2% sampling for control. There isn't that much detail on this that we usually get asked about, so we're not going to go deeper. But in the 1698, which is the regulation that describes the control in third countries specifically, there is a lot of interesting rules and relevant rules. And so there is some text or information there on the purpose of taking and analyzing samples, and it's based on risk assessment. And basically, each CP will need to submit various policies and methodology and so on to the EU as part of their recognition or application dossier, and the EU will approve that. And I guess once this is clearer, there will be more information available, but basically this will be up to the CPs according to their own approved procedures. And actually, the sampling part is expected to have more of a cost effect than the higher external control rate. And just to point this out, even more intense sampling will be required for higher risk products in the future. One sample for each lot imported, so higher sampling requirements on top of the basic requirements. Next. Ooh. You have to click next, I think. My text doesn't show. Yes, sorry, this is still. So during the external inspection of a group of operators, there is, just to give you this overview, although it's not the main topic today, there is always something like a group ICS office visit with an ICS manager interview, reviewing procedures and records, checking the members list, reviewing non-conformities and measures, which sort of feeds into the overall evaluation of a group of operator. There is also the process where the external inspector goes and re-inspects in future 5% of members. These members are selected by the inspector on a risk-based approach. This means the inspector should do a full organic farm inspection, and it's very important. The main purpose of the re-inspection is to cross-check the external findings with the ICS findings and the ICS data, because the main purpose of the re-inspection is to evaluate the quality of the ICS. During some of these visits, the inspector needs to take sample, and it's also now an explicit requirement that the inspector has to witness some internal inspections, so that the internal inspector conducts the inspection and the external inspector basically watches the inspection to assess whether it's effective. There's also the visit of purchase centers and the check of traceability records and separation measures and measures to avoid contamination. Next. If there are ICS deficiencies, there is a new Article 36.2 that control bodies shall withdraw the certificate for the whole group where deficiencies in the setup or functioning of the ICS affect the integrity of organic and in conversion products. In particular, failures to detect or address non-compliance by individual members of the group of operators. And then this Article 36.2 also includes a long list of ICS deficiencies, which is even much longer than I've written and sort of summarized here. Essentially, this is to remind you the quality expectations are extremely high in terms of what the regulation requires. Yeah, so it's definitely worth trying to make sure that your ICS is up to the challenge. Next. What is another important topic that actually will be complex to manage, is that the EU group certification rules will now differ from all other rules. Specifically, I wanted to highlight to you that the new NOP rules for grower groups have been published meanwhile. You find the link, you will find the link in the document, but it's also reasonably easy to find the new rule online. The new NOP rules, interestingly, are very much in line with the approach IFOAM has been promoting for the last 20 years. And even according to the new rules, company organized contract production seems to be allowed. There is no maximum farm group size. There is no maximum member size. And most importantly, the certification of certified groups is possible in their current legal structure. So that will make it a bit complex as most groups have both NOP and EU certification. Some groups may need to consider whether they do part of their operations under NOP, part of their operations under EU, or some subgroups, some separate groups doing both. But it completely changes the situation to the system we have up to now, where it's all under the same system. It's always the same legal entities that have been certified. And of course, the same even applies to other schemes like Rainforest Alliance, Global Gap, that also require an ICS and apply an external control rate. It also applies to some extent to fair trade, although it's a different certification system, that there will be a complexity which legal entity is fair trade certified versus which legal entity is then EU organic certified. Now that many cooperatives will need to set up new separate legal entities, this will be an added complexity that we've also sort of tried to explain to our friends in the fair trade movement as well as an additional challenge. And also the difference to a USDA NOP is definitely something, it's an interesting new situation. Next. To close this on a slightly more positive note, I want to tell you, especially I've seen there's many certification bodies, many inspectors in the call as well. IFOAM has also written or developed in the working group guidance and training on external control of group of operators for CBs in third countries. This is also ready. It's just been much less debated because the rules are quite clear in the regulation, and it was fairly easy to prepare that particular summary, but it will also be published in the next coming weeks or months and will be available on the IFOAM website. FIBO is also busy developing or has developed various handbooks and trainings on the new regulation, all of which were also slightly on hold because of this uncertainty around the group of operator legal entity, but which are due to be published now very soon. In particular, the handbook of the product quality in Africa training handbook that also has a part on organic production rules that is more detailed than we were able to include now in the IFOAM guidance, and a section that explains the internal control system requirements in a bit more detail than what we were able to include here. So this and further resources will be made available or via the IFOAM website as they become available. And this also will be the case for other language versions. Of course, we hope to be able to publish the guidance also in French and Spanish. And we've already had some discussions maybe with partner organization to help us with the translation, but this will be done once the final graphic facelift and editing has been done. And then they will be also published on the IFOAM website. Next, and I think we're finished. Thank you so much.
Good. So thank you very much for Florentine for this very comprehensive, updated and final version of the guidance, which we hope that it can help all the participants to go through this transition period. And as now we are approaching Q&A session. I would like to engage all the participants and to gather their opinions on how the new regulation will impact to their work of grower groups. So please participate in our poll, which is showing now, and the result will be shared later on before we conclude this event. And so it also could be communicated with interesting parties beyond this session. So in the meantime, we will now address the few select questions that have received the most upvotes. So Flood, could you please share with us some interesting questions we have received today from the audience?
Thank you, Florentine. Thank you, Tachin. Indeed, we had a lot of questions. I worked hard and answered at least 37 of them, probably 35 were related. If we can share slides, so this I can repeat once again. Yes, we will share slides, and we also will share the link to this recording for those of your colleagues who were not able to participate. They will watch it after the event, so it's not a problem. We will also adapt, improve a bit the design of slides and publish it as official guidance that will be available on our website. So now I go into questions, and I personally would like to focus on questions related to cooperative, since this is information that we have communicated differently during our previous events, and it is important to emphasize this once again. So once again, is it, Florentino, possible that the legal entity has also large or non-organic or in conversion members? Could you please tell us?
Yes, it is indeed impossible, as the EU has clarified in the frequently asked question, because of that requirement that the legal entity can only be composed of farmers that commit to compliance. So other than we have communicated earlier, a cooperative which has any non-organic statutory members, because this is what the group is composed of, or any members that is too large under this rule that I've explained for group certification, cannot be certified as a group of operator in its current form. So we'll have the same challenge as a trader, say that they have to set up or find another existing legal entity that is composed only of eligible organic farmers. So this is unfortunately the case, and in the PDF version of this deck, we have also included all the original texts of the Commission, because this particular question has been answered by the Commission, but I don't think you'll find that answer easier than ours.
And it applies also for farmers in conversion.
Farmers in conversion is all right. They just have to be committed to the organic production rules. It could even be a conventional farmer that commits to the organic production rules.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So another question is about cooperative unions. So for instance, there is a cooperative union with number of members that is larger than 2,000. So can he, for instance, be certified as processor operator as a union and leave, or should he leave the group of operators or not? So yeah, please explain.
It's as I tried to explain before. I mean, a union with already more than 2,000 members anyway, for that size reason, can't be certified as a group of operators. So something has to be done about this. But as I said, also most unions have also non-organic primary society members. So also for that reason, can't be certified as a group of operators. So effectively, the union will be certified, can be only certified as preparation and export operator, so like a trading unit, And
Mhm.
there will be the need to have an additional other group of operator legal entity that fits all the definition points of the EU regulation. So as in the example I've shown, for example, there could be the option to set up a new association of organic primary society members as the legal entity that is set up by the union for the purpose of being certified as a group of operator. And then the union buys the product from this new association of organic primary society members and sells it to the EU. But it's the same problem as many cooperatives and traders have. In the end, it's not one certification and one unit that is certified, but it's two units. It's the union as exporter processor plus this new association, for example, of primary society members, or the certification in the union is moved to primary society level if the primary societies are composed only of organic farmers, which may be the case, but may not be the case. So
Thank you. You already answered several next questions. So the next question will be then, can a single legal entity represent more than one group of operators? Very simple question.
is this a simple question?
If one legal entity can have, can a single legal entity represent more than one group of operators?
I mean, the question is what means represent, but I assume the answer is no. I assume the question refers to the situation that I tried to explain and that is answered by the Commission. Say a cooperative, under the legal personality of the cooperative, can there be several smaller groups of operators under the same umbrella of that legal entity of a large, say a large cooperative with 20,000 members? Obviously the hope would have been, could there be small group of operator units under that umbrella of the larger legal entity? Answer is no. Answer question answered by the EU Commission, tried to explain it. Answer is no. Each group of operators has to have its own legal personality to be certified and to meet the EU definition.
Okay, thank you. Then one more question, but this time into the direction of central processing and preparation. If a group of farmers are together processing their crop, for instance, wet processing of coffee, can this still fall under the group of operator certification? Or should this fall under the company certification? Are there limitations on the quality to be handled here when it is group of operators?
Okay, so luckily, this is one of the things where the answer was yes by the European Commission. So yes, a group of operators can be certified for all activities. But the question is still, say, the dry processing of coffee is usually done in an external unit that is often just subcontracted. So it will still be up to the certification body how the different activities are most effectively controlled and certified. And the procedures for this will depend on the CB. But it's not restricted. The group of operator definition does not restrict that the group does own preparation activities after collecting the products from members. So for example, a cocoa cooperative, some farmers sell the cocoa pots to the cooperative, and the cooperative collects all these cocoa pots and then does the processing of cocoa beans centrally at their own unit. This could be an activity that is covered according to how I read the answer of the European Commission. It's all activities can be included. This was an open question. This was one of the open questions that has been debated a lot, but this is a question where ultimately the answer was yes, all activities can be done by a group of operators.
Thank you. Now, one of the most frequent questions was about parallel production. There was a lot of confusion. You repeated several times, but I still see questions coming up. There was a lot of confusion. How come that, for instance, how come that parallel production is permitted, but conventional members are not permitted in the legal entity. Could you please explain this one more time? There was also a question related to, for instance, purchasing centers, that they can still purchase organic and non-organic products. So where non-organic products come from, if there are no conventional farmers in the group. Could you please explain this?
I mean, actually, this also confused me or us in the analysis in the beginning, because it doesn't seem logical. But it's because a member in a group of operator is considered an operator, and these are the general operator rules that apply to operators of any size under the EU regulation. So the operator can have a non-organic unit, same whether is a member in a group of operator or an individual farm, because on operator level, there is no difference. But since the group of operators is this new concept defined by the EU, they have written in this definition, this particular restriction that apparently means that a group of operators cannot have any statutory member, because it must be legally composed of organic farmers. And this is where the restriction comes in. If the same cooperative in future will be certified as an operator, then again, as an operator, there is no such restriction. An operator can have what legal form whatsoever. It can be composed of whoever. There's no restrictions. It's only for this, what they call or think of as simplified certification, the group of operator units, that the definition has been very restrictive to, I assume, restrictive to genuine organic smallholder groups composed of smallholder organic farmers only. But yeah, it is confusing. The composition rule is the legal entity cannot be composed of non-organic farmers, but the organic or conversion farmers in the group can have a non-organic unit. And even theoretically, parallel production, if the ICS can manage it, and if all these additional conditions that I've explained that are actually quite strict are met. So the parallel production is also restricted for a limited number of years, and so on and so forth. But yes, it's a bit weird. So theoretically, an organic coffee cooperative could also be selling the organic, I don't know, pulses that their members, or their non-organic pulses that their members are growing for the national market. This would be the non-organic products in the purchase centers that would still be permitted.
Thank you. Thank you. Then also one of the most popular questions, surprisingly, probably from our European participants who just started investigating if group certification is a feasible options for them. So what is a minimum number in the group of operators? Is it set? So no, how many minimum farmers can participate?
Yeah. There is no minimum number in the regulation, but there is a minimum external control. So if you're smaller than 10 farmers, I mean, you have essentially 100% control thing, and running and operating an ICS according to all these specifications on top of 100% control is sure going to be much more expensive and much more complex than having individual farm certification, especially in Europe. So according to my experience, group certification starts to make only sense way above 30 farmers, better 50 or even 100. And it becomes more viable if you have several hundred producers in a group and an ICS. And within Europe, the experience so far has that the moment that operators and groups look closer at it, the conditions are actually very restrictive. So we don't expect that there will be many groups in Europe, because the 25,000 euro turnover threshold is actually going to hit in Europe, because many farmers that are organized in cooperatives have higher organic turnovers than that. And also, realistically, group certification limits the freedom of each farmer in the group. Let's be honest about it, because an individual certified farmer can sell to whoever, whereas if you're certified as a farmer in the group, you can only sell through the group as organic. You cannot sell to other traders as organic. and you need to collaborate, you be under that system. So it only makes sense on the specific circumstances. And I think some countries with, like also in Turkey, quite a lot of groups may even change to a system that each farmer is individually controlled and certified, because it works better for complex farms that maybe grow also different crops, so that they need different markets and different market partners than their neighbors.
Okay, thank you. It's very clear. Now, also very popular question about subcontracting of ICS. And for instance, if this one ICS system can provide services to two groups. For instance, a former cooperative was 4,000 members. It was split on two for 2,000. And if one ICS can work on two groups of operators.
Yes. So luckily there, the regulation allows the flexibility that the ICS manager and the ICS inspectors can be external if they are appointed by the new group of operator units. So yes, this could be done centrally as a central service. I just want to point out, if it's very large groups, and given all these responsibilities of the ICS manager and the IC inspectors of a well-functioning ICS, if it's two groups of 2,000 members each, it's unrealistic that they share one ICS manager and have a quality ICS system. But that's another question. It could be the central ICS team of the cooperative if that central ICS system can provide several qualified ICS manager and use the same pool of ICS inspectors of the cooperative, and this will make a lot of sense also for these new units, that it can be the same ICS team as before that does the inspection. I also strongly suggest it, because it takes quite some time to build up a qualified ICS team, and luckily we have that flexibility. At least there will just have to be some contracts or rules or agreement between the two units, then an appointment of the ICS manager, an appointment of each ICS inspector, and then this ticks the regulatory boxes.
Thank you. Then also there were some questions about your simplified either or rule. So the question is, if a farmer is having 6 hectares total land holding and annually and has annual turnover of 24,000 euros, is it eligible for the group of operators?
According to the legal text, it would be eligible, because he has to meet either the maximum 5 hectare rule or the turnover rule. If it's a country where individual certification costs more than 500 euro a year, which is the case in most countries. But if I was an ICS, I would not set my threshold at 24,000 euros, because effectively this way may mean that next year suddenly he has a bumper crop and I exceed that, and then I have to exit that member, or it's going to be tricky to manage. So the question will be how it can be done, but this farmer would meet the requirement, as would a mango farmer in Uganda that has even 6 hectares of mango and a total land holding of 10 hectares, because when you calculate the turnover of that farm in organic production, the farm gate prices this farmer receives, he or she will be so much lower than the 25,000 euros. So the higher land size is not a problem. This farmer would be eligible for group certification. The tricky bit is if really it's such a large farmer that they come very close to that 25,000 euro threshold, because there'll always be a certain fluctuation. Of course, we're talking about organic turnover, and organic turnover means the sales to the group. So since farmers usually also sell elsewhere, you might need to look at the actual sales to the cooperative or to the unit to determine the actual organic turnover, because only the product sold to the group is organic. If a farmer sells his product elsewhere, it's non-organic sales.
Thank you. Then the question is about types of legal entities. Yeah, you explained it very thoroughly on your slides, but still, for instance, there is a very good question from National Organic Movement in Nigeria, who are asking if they can, if they are legal entities, a National Organic Movement can become a group of operators.
Interesting question. I think it is probably, I mean, it would have to be evaluated, but I assume yes, since they will be composed of, or but the point is they might not be composed of organic, only of organic farmers, because they'll be also composed of members who are processors, or members who are trade partners, or who are like-minded NGOs. So probably it wouldn't meet the GOO definition for that reason. But just as an idea, maybe if there is only rather few organic farmers in the country, such a national movement could help to set up a farmer composed group that then sells collectively to different buyers, essentially, again, like a new group of operator units that can sell to different traders in the countries who continue to export the product. So yes, there is all these kind of options. There's just these restrictions on the legal entity that it has to be composed of farmers, which is often the tricky bit, and only composed of farmers who are committed to organic production. So that might be the restriction there in terms of legal entity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There is also a good question from, yeah, it might be a bit rhetorical, but still, what to do if the EU regulation clashes with national regulation that regulates who can be a member of a cooperative, because it might be rude to kick out members of existing cooperatives that were functioning very well for many years, and now how can they adapt?
There is no easy answer for this. I mean, this is what we have tried to argue, and the practical implications are very tough for many groups. Effectively, from what I understood, it is hard in many cooperatives to exclude non-organic members, or even the odd too large farms. So there also the only option will be to set up a new legal entity according to EU definition as the future group of operators as the only solution. So it's an artificial new unit set up to meet the group of operator definition of the EU. Unfortunately, I can't give any better news, as much as I would love to answer otherwise.
Yes, this is what we also communicated during our previous events, so there is no easy answer for this question. Also, there is a question if FIBL, IFOAM are planning to make a not only the guidance, but also some practical handbook how to adapt. For instance, I know that, for instance, FIBL is helping cooperatives in Ethiopia to adapt to this new changes. So will you publish a new manual how to adapt?
What we can publish in that particular situation is exactly the handbook I was referring to, but the handbook, the definition stays rather generic at that point. And what we realize also, since a lot of the trickiness is in the legal personality and the structure. So what I found now in the last years is that it would make most sense to collaborate very closely on national level, because in each country, effectively, the situation will be different. We'll start now as FIBL, for example, to collaborate with the organic sector in Ecuador to have a discussion what the alignment means there. And if you do it for one country, at least you can identify local, national legal forms with their respective, legal restrictions or rights or advantages to help operators. And this is also something I would strongly encourage support organizations or NGOs to provide national support, maybe even national legal advisors that maybe support organizations could make available to national organic movements through national organic movements who help cooperatives to actually find suitable legal solutions, because this is nothing, a lot of it in the end is legal and operational, how you set up your contracts, how you set up these new units, how you organize your supply chains in these new settings. And the legal situation is quite different in each country, and it will also differ whether it's a private company in fresh fruits compared to large cooperatives in coffee. So beyond, I think, what we have right now, which is generic and worldwide, it will have to be much more national, pragmatic, and realistically, because we're talking about a huge scale, driven by many more actor and support organizations that hopefully will help to provide legal advice to groups and so on to implement these new rules. It's definitely not something neither IFORM nor FIBO can help the entire world with on our own.
Thank you. So you basically answered all questions that I have picked. For instance, maybe we'll take a couple of more for another 5 minutes, and then we can finalize. So for instance, there was a question about joint marketing system. Could you please go more into details? So what does this mean, the joint marketing systems that a group of operators has to have? Does this mean that, for instance, they are selling only through the single storage, or does this mean that members of the group can sell individually under the same framework agreement to the buyer?
There is no additional detail on the joint marketing system in the regulation itself, but it is very clear the farmer is not individually certified. He cannot sell to whoever under this. The certification is through the joint marketing of the group. So the sales have to be in the name of the group as organic. So there is a sale between the member of a group to the group, and then it's in the joint marketing system and sold as a group. So this is the basic, and this is how it has been with group certification since 20 years, and this makes sense. This is the difference between individual certification and group certification. It's also the restriction which farmers need to be aware of, especially larger farms. Actually, they might be well off having their individual certification and selling to different traders and managing the certification themselves. But what is the open question is now if there can be support. Say the new artificial group of operator farmers unit doesn't have the money or means to go collect the fresh mango from farm gate, then the group of operator could officially probably subcontract the farm gate collection to a partner company that does it right now according to quality specifications. But still, at the end of the day, there has to be an invoice between the group unit and the trader, because it has to go through the joint marketing system. Payment of farmers is a different question, how it's done in practice, but the invoicing way is clearly through the group, because it has to go through the joint marketing system and being marketed as a group to external buyers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And it will be up to the CBs to evaluate each case, because also that one is a bit complex what it means in reality. But there is no individual certificate. A member in a group of operator has no right of its own certificate. He's not certified. He's just a member in a group of operator that's certified.
Okay, thank you. One more question related to conversion. So for instance, there is one farmer that has one organic plot and one plot that is in conversion, and both organic wheat plot and in conversion wheat plot. In this situation, can this farmer be a member of the same group of operators? I assume
yes. He can. Yes, he can. He's an operator, so he can have a separate organic production unit and conversion production unit. And effectively, any organic farmer will have that situation if he takes on a new plot of land. It's also extremely common in Europe. You take a new plot of land, so the new plot of land will be in conversion. So effectively, you will have organic fields and conversion fields, and then all the separation measures obviously have to hold to ensure at all times the separation between the organic and the conversion unit. And this is the same for a member in a group of operators.
Okay, and the last question, if a group of operators with a legal entity is exporting their products themselves, does the export activity needs its own organic certification or not?
No, a group of operator can do any activity is what we heard as an answer. Whether the ECB considered this necessary to say complete an additional checklist for the export activity is another question, but it could be theoretically done by the same legal entity as long as these cooperatives meets all the other requirements and the definition of a group of operators. Say if it's an organic cooperative of organic palm producers with 500 producers in Ivory Coast, and they have their own cooperative and they process their product and sell it to Europe. This would meet the EU definition as a group of operators, and a group of operator can conduct any activity under its certification. There will still be different control procedures applied by the external inspector to make sure they cover all the activities of this legal entity, but there is no restrictions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for both Florentine and Flood for this Q&A session. We are sorry that we can take all the questions, but I hope you will find more details and maybe answers while the other materials and the slide will be available in the near future. And especially we thank Florentine for your insightful answers. Now let's proceed to share the result of the poll we conducted today. So first of all, it's great to see such a diverse audience here. Each stakeholder along the value chain is critical and for contributing and improving our sustainable food system. According to the result from the first poll regarding the background of participant, we have a wide range of professionals. And as you can see that the majority of today's participant is coming from certification bodies, which accounts for 41%. And indeed, their awareness is relevant to how to help the growers to tackle the difficulties and indicate the future direction. And it's followed by the second rank is processors and trader account for 13% who work closely with the farmers. Moreover, it's also important to highlight that there are around 7% of our guests today is from government and donor agency. Because it's also important to demonstrate to them that the potential difficulties and opportunities that the farmer may face, and in order to adapt all these changes, so they are able to design appropriate future programs to tackle these challenges and ideally creating an enabling environment. So let's move on to the second poll. The responses we have received from the second poll provide valuable insight into the expectation and also potential effect to the new requirements on various stakeholders, specifically in organic sector. So we can tell that still the new regulation and requirements are not easy to deal with, and obviously extensive support are sorely needed to assist the stakeholders. These opinions account for more than 40%, But this is also the direction that IFOM, FIBO, and all our partners are working on to help improve this situation. On the other hand, a smaller group of participants, although they are minor, I mean, around 70%, they still positively think that these adaptations are manageable. So maybe this group of people, it will be great for them to share with others who are currently still struggling about their viewpoint and successful stories. It's also worthy to mention that there are around 22% of the participants today consider that the new rules actually enhance the integrity and control measure of organic agriculture. So overall, the result of the poll shows that there are different opinions and complexities surrounding the new requirements and regulation. This highlights that the need for everyone to engage in ongoing discussions, and we should all work together to tackle the challenges, but most importantly, we need to seize the opportunity we are going to discover throughout the ways. And thank you very much, Vlad.
Thank you, Tachin, for your summary. Thank you, Florentine, for answering questions. With this, I would like to tell some final remarks and close the session. So, as you might have heard, the last week has been declared as the hottest week in the history. UN officials have recently said that climate change might be out of the control. Organic farmers offer a system that can reduce environmental impact compared to conventional farming. By embracing organic agriculture, we can actively work towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. Let's not forget also that smallholder farmers, for instance, that smaller than 5 hectares cultivate around 20% of agricultural land worldwide. Farmers that have less than 2 hectares produce approximately 1/3 of food worldwide. Of course, these numbers are twice or even more higher in developing countries. Organic agriculture can deliver on climate change only if we build a fair and inclusive system for all smallholders, and we will continue our dialogue with all interested parties to ensure this. I encourage our participants to become members of IFOM Organics International. Your membership fees will give us additional ability to work more in this direction. Thank you very much to our audience. Thank you very much, Florentine. Thank you, Tachin, for this great session. Thank you to members of IFOM, and thank you to our donor, SECO, for making this event happen. On this, I close our event. As promised, we will share all recordings and slides. See you during next hour events. Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.